So how many of you think, tell me genuinely, honestly, don't try to think what is the correct answer, just genuinely tell me, how many of you think that you are in control of your lives? Maybe not to 100%, but 50%, 70%, 80%, 10%, or so let's go around the room, take few responses. I saw this gentleman raising his hand. You're in control of your life. Okay, true. Who else?
To some extent, not 100%.
Not 100%, but maybe 50%? Whatever, okay, to some extent. So by the way, I'm actually quite impressed by this young gentleman here. He's been sitting all the way. And did you like the kirtan? Tell us your name. What is your name?
Dave.
Dave. Did you like the chanting? You did? Okay. And how old are you? 13? So which grade do you go to in school? 7th. 8th? Okay. Middle school. Just finishing middle school. So I'm going to speak something which will interest you also, hopefully. Okay? So you can continue to pay attention. So anybody else who feel that they are in control of their lives? You also, yes. Anybody else?
All of us are, to some extent.
To some extent.
Yes.
Does anybody feel that they are absolutely not in control? Anybody on the other extreme? So we do have 2 hands. One more hand here. Another hand. So looks like we have a split, right? So now, is it a fair question to ask that the living entities, especially the human form of life, is the living entity in control of their life or they are not in control of their life? In this audience itself, we have a split, right? Some are saying they are not in control, some are saying they are in control to some extent. So what is the truth? What is the nature of reality? It's both. How can two opposites be simultaneously be true?
Well, we do have control through our own karmas, like we choose to do what we choose to do, right? So we have control there, but we don't have control on the result of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is both.
So it is both? Okay.
But our karma is the result of our previous karma. So if we are not in control, maybe we are in control like maybe 0.00001%. But 99.9999% we are just...
Yeah, so it's a good point that you bring out, is saying that it is both, and you bring in the concept of karma. So I'm going to read you a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which will kind of answer this question, and we'll also connect this to what is said in one of the verses in Srimad Bhagvatam. So this is from the 3rd chapter. The reason I am discussing this particular topic is because eventually I want to end by mentioning what is the difference between the activities conducted by the ordinary living entities and the activities those are conducted by Lord Krishna when he appears on this planet. When he appears on this earth, he also performs some activities. So the question is whether his activities and our activities are of the same nature. And if they are not, then how exactly are those different? And how do we benefit by studying these differences and by understanding his activities? Okay, so let me find this verse. This appears in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It's 327. Prakrutehe kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudatma karta aham iti manyate. So what does this verse mean? The spirit soul, bewildered under the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of material nature. That means did we, so I think we had almost everybody in the room when I was mentioning about ahankar, or this energy known as the false ego. The false ego is the energy that compels us to identify with our mind, body and intelligence. But neither of these things, the mind, body and intelligence, is our own true self. It's only because of the false ego that we attach ourselves to these externals and we identify ourselves with those and we use those to conduct our activities. So under the influence of false ego, Lord Krishna is explaining here that the living entity thinks that he is in control and he is performing these activities. But the words here says ahankara vimudhatma, vimudha atma. Mudha means, what does mudha mean in Sanskrit? Mudha means foolish. Vimudha means extremely foolish. So ahankara vimudhatma. What does ahankara do? The ahankara basically puts us in a state of extreme foolishness. And it bewilders us thinking that we are in control and we are doing these activities. But in actuality, these activities are being conducted by the three modes of material nature. So the reality is, according to the Bhagavad Gita, that there is the material nature is called Prakriti. Prakriti consists of these three modes of goodness, passion and ignorance. So whatever activities you see of your own or others or other living entities, whatever activities you see of the living entities in this world basically comprise of the combination of these three modes called modes of goodness, passion and ignorance. So let's take some examples about activities in mode of goodness. What does anybody, Sattva Gun, have you heard of Sattva Gun before? Can you give an example of an activity in the mode of goodness? Prayers, doing puja, some kind of spiritual activity. Volunteering, doing some charitable work. Yes. Giving donations, mode of goodness. Doing service, selfless service, mode of goodness. Mode of passion, Rajogun.
Like teaching could be your passion. Advancing people in their lives could be your passion. Those are the examples, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about the mode activity under the mode of passion. And yes, and you're true that what you're saying is also true, that pursuing your passion, right? Passion means excessive desire. I want to be this, I want to do this, I want to achieve this, I want to get there, right? That kind of motivation or the activity that you do under that kind of motivation is called activities in the mode of passion. And if you notice, activities in the mode of passion are always kind of agitating and they're always troublesome. They don't let you calm down because you're always pursuing strongly. Okay, that's the nature of the activity in the mode of passion. I'm not saying either it's good or bad, I'm just describing these things. What about mode of ignorance? Tamogun, activities in Tamogun? Anger is passion. Anger is passion. When you're very angry, you say what you don't mean or things like that. Depression, yes. Excessive sleep and also forms of intoxication. If one intoxicates oneself, then loses his sense and then kind of lose your sense of rational and sense of consciousness for some time. So those are activities, those are examples of the mode of ignorance. So the entire world consists of these three modes and it's a mixture of these three modes. So the modes basically behave like personalities and these are mixed in our bodies, and our bodies basically are conducted by these three modes. It's like a machine. Like machines, computers are doing amazing things these days, right? But the best machine has been long been created and nobody can ever match it or beat it. This machine of material energy is created by the Supreme Lord, and this machine is awarding different types of bodies to the living entities so that they can pursue their desires and conduct different activities under these different modes. So once we are under the influence of false ego, we do think that we are in control and we try to drive towards our goals under the influence of these three modes. But the actual reality, the actual underlying reality is that the living entity is a passive observer, not a passive, it's an active observer. And the actual reality is that the work is being done by the three modes, but I am identifying myself with what is being done because of the influence of false ego. And I said active observer. What does active observer mean? Observer means we're just observing. The actual position of the living entity is that of observing. We're not actually doing anything. The activity is being conducted by the three modes. But we identify ourselves with that and we think we are doing it. And the reason it's called active is because we are desiring. The desire is there. And that's our real activity. The desire to enjoy, the desire to lord it, the desire to be in control is there. And that desire is what awards us a body suitable to go forward with those, go forward to fulfill those desires. And that is being conducted by the material energy. And this energy is the energy of Krishna. This energy is one of the energies of Krishna. So later on in the 7th chapter, Krishna says, know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion and ignorance, are manifested by my energy. So what we just talked about is connected again here in the 7th chapter. They are conducted by his energy. So he's saying these modes are my energy. I am in one sense everything. In one sense, the energy and the energetic are non-different, right? Because the energy comes from the energetic. So he says, in one sense I am everything, but I am independent. I am not under the control. I am not under the modes of material nature, but for they, on the contrary, are within me. That means we are under the control of material nature, and the material nature is under his control. So our activities and his activities can never be on the same platform. So living entities are under control, and Supreme Lord is in control of the energy that controls us. So that's the relation, or that's the difference between our activities and his activities. So coming back to the question about what we think about being in control of our lives. So we did have few hands saying that they are not in control. So can I ask what is the reason, or if what I described just now, does it shed more light? Does it help you to understand when we say we are not in control, what does it actually mean? Does that help you? And to the response that Mataji, you gave, that you said that we are in control to some extent, right? We are in control, and we conduct our activities under the law of karma. So is it clear that how in actuality the activities are being conducted and what karma constitutes? Is it okay? Do you?
I'm Jain, so I don't know much about
Okay. So the Bhagavad Gita is very nice and detailed. It gives you the entire science. It gives a big picture of how things are happening. Things are taking place. And in the next verse, it says in the 7th chapter, deluded by the three modes, these three modes, goodness, passion, ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So our activities under the influence of the three modes of material nature, those actually prevent us from knowing Krishna in truth, from knowing the Supreme Controller as he is. So because we are under the control of these three modes, then we go on with our activities under illusion, and we are not able to identify and understand the activities of the Supreme Controller. But in the next verse he says, this divine energy of mine consisting of the three modes is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So the process that we are following, in summary, if you are to give one name to it, right? We did chanting today, we are hearing from the Bhagavad Gita, and there are few other activities that we like to perform. And if we are to summarize everything in one word, what would that be? There can be multiple answers to this. One word would be, one of the answers would be Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti. What is Bhakti? Bhakti means, Bhakti constitutes primarily surrender. Surrender means I am helpless. I cannot do this. I cannot overcome this influence of material energy on my own, and I need help. I need help from a superior source. So when one realizes that and one surrenders in that mood and chants or takes shelter of the scripture, then you'll see that reciprocation does come from the higher source. So Krishna is saying that this divine energy of mind, this consisting of 3 modes, is very difficult to overcome. And the reason it's difficult is because it's divine. The energy is coming from Krishna, therefore it is divine. Devi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya means extremely difficult to overcome, practically impossible. But those who surrender unto me, Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. Maya means this material energy, they are able to cross over it, Tarantite. And when one does that, when one is able to surrender and overcome the illusory energy of the Lord, then we are able to understand in reality the activities of Lord Krishna. Okay, so there is a very nice verse in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagvatam where some activities of Krishna after he leaves Vrindavan. So we watched Mahabharata, right? Most of us watched Mahabharata. So he was in Vrindavan till his teenage years, and after that he leaves for Mathura, and he has a lot of activities to conduct outside Vrindavan. And one of his activities that is described here in the 3rd canto, 3rd chapter, is how he marries Rukmini, how he kidnaps Rukmini amongst the all the princes that have come together with an aspiration to marry her. The leader of those being Shishupal. Shishupal is arranged to marry Rukmini, but Krishna rescues her from that assembly and he practically kidnaps her. And then there is also a description about how Narakasura he kidnaps lot of these princes and house arrests them in one place, and how Krishna rescues all of those princes and later on goes on to marry all those princes. And after these descriptions are given, which may seem like ordinary activities, like ordinary personalities, but in order to differentiate the activities of Krishna, of the Supreme Controller, and our ordinary activities, this nice verse is there. It's in the 3rd canto, 3rd chapter. So I will read this verse and try to connect what we have discussed so far, and then we can stop. So this verse says, every living entity is controlled by a supernatural force, and thus his sense enjoyment is also under the control of that supernatural force. No one therefore can put his faith in Lord Krishna's transcendental sense activities, but one who has become a devotee of the Lord by rendering devotional service. So it's practically the same message that I tried to tell you from the Bhagavad Gita, but now it's given in relation to the activities that have been described previously. So this is the 23rd verse in this chapter, but all the previous verses, they talk about the activities of Lord Krishna, and now here it says that ordinary living entities, the activities are actually under the control of a supernatural force. That supernatural force is nothing but this material energy known as Prakriti. And our activities and our sense enjoyments are controlled by this supernatural force. And we can, as long as we are under that control, we cannot understand Krishna's activities in truth. But if we become a devotee of Krishna, then we are able to appreciate, we are able to understand these activities and how they are different from our ordinary activities. And the result of such understanding is that we attain a taste to the spiritual nature of Lord Krishna. And once we attain the taste, we gradually lose taste for material sense enjoyment, and that serves as an impetus to discover our own true spiritual self, and that leads us to the highest goal of life. So it all connects together. The message of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, it connects together. But Bhagavad Gita, as I said, is like the preliminary study. If we understand the basics, then we are able to understand the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are able to appreciate the message of Srimad Bhagavatam much nicely. Much more nicely. Okay, so I will stop there, and it's 9 o'clock. If you have any questions, we could talk about that, or we could end. Sandeep Prabhu, you want to say something? Or
I have a question.
yes, questions.
Why did God create false ego?
Why did God? That's a very good question. Why did God create false ego? False ego is the energy that binds us to the material energy, and it compels us to misidentify ourselves. Well, the reason is that the living entities have a tendency to enjoy being separate than God. So, Mamaivamsho Jivaloke Jivabhuta Sanatanaha Mana Shasthani Indriyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati. In the 15th chapter, Lord Krishna says, Mamaivamsho Jivabhuta means my parts. They are my part and parcels. To give you an example, we could give two examples. Like the children that are born from us, right? You can say that they are my part, but they have come forth from our being, right? So you can say they are my part. You can claim them. You can claim your children, right? That's legal. Or another example is that if there's a machine, right, and machine consists of various moving parts and so on. So let's say there is a screw or a bolt somewhere in the machine, which is a part. If it falls apart, if it comes out, then there might be some trouble in the functioning of the machine. So we could say that this part is a part and parcel of this machine. Put it back, it will work perfectly. Right? So in a similar way, the living entities are parts of the Supreme Spirit, of the Supreme Controller, God. But because Krishna is fully independent, he has no other controller above him. That means he is completely independent to do whatever he likes. Nobody to control him. Right? So that nature has trickled down to the living entities as well, but in minute quantity. So we also have independence, but in minute quantity. Not like Krishna. He is in control of the material energy, but when we use our independence to try and enjoy separately from Krishna, like this part of the machine trying to coming out and do something on its own, or children prematurely leaving home and trying to do something on their own, they will suffer, they will fail. So living entity's position is something like that. We try to, we choose, the living entity chooses to quit association of God and try to enjoy on his own. That is impossible. But to make it possible, in order to satisfy that kind of desire of the living entity, Krishna says, okay, take this false identification and now go and try to enjoy. Otherwise it's not possible. So he awards the false ego, he awards the false identification to satisfy our desire to enjoy separate than him.
The reason we have this desire is because of false ego.
No, it's the false ego comes because of the desire. One is the cause, the other is the effect. So the effect is false ego, but deeper within the false, if you dive deep, then the reason for false ego is the desire. So the process of bhakti yoga, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, is the process of cleansing these desires, cleansing. So it is to be understood properly, meaning that we don't try to eliminate the desire. The living entity can never become desireless, but the process is that of dovetailing. So if we have a desire to enjoy, the desire to enjoy is natural and it's innate in the spiritual living entity. That's why the nature is that of ananda or bliss. If we don't have desire to enjoy, we can never be blissful. So we are by nature blissful, so there is a desire to enjoy, that is not unnatural. But we need to dovetail. Dovetail means that we need to divert our propensity to enjoy independently to a propensity to enjoy while being under the shelter of God. So it's like a child going away prematurely, suffers and then comes back home. He comes to his senses, comes back home, and then he's with his parents. So it's exactly like that. So living entities, we have left our Supreme Father and wandering in the material world under false identification. But if we come back to our senses, take to this process and then go back to our original position. So that's actually the sum and substance of this entire thing, entire process, what we're trying to do. We're trying to go back to our original spiritual nature and be under the shelter of the spiritual energy. Does that make sense? Yeah, and it has been described that you cannot, we have been here for so long that we have practically forgotten that we do have a home, a real home, a permanent shelter. But we have forgotten completely. So it's a process of recollecting, remembering and bringing out that original nature. And as long as we are in forgetfulness, we just keep wandering in the material world, one life after another. ब्रह्मांड भ्रमिते कोनो भाग्यवान जीव गुरु कृष्ण कृपाए पाए भक्ति लता बीज. There's a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says Brahmanda Brahmide Kono Bhagwan means Brahman. This Brahmanda means the universe. It's called Brahma Anda. It's in the shape of an egg. This universe is been described in Srimad Bhagavatam in the shape of an egg. Therefore it's called Brahmanda. And the Jiva, living entities, are basically wandering, going up and down, just like a giant wheel. We have seen giant wheels, like in these here. So it goes up and down, right? So sometimes the living entity attains a very high position, even that of demigods. Maybe becomes CEO of a company or president of a country or something like that. And then maybe a few lifetimes later, he's in such a low state, maybe like a dog in the street. We don't know. It's living entities transmigrating from one life to another. Again go up, again come down. Again go up, again come down. It's basically practically endless cycle of repeated birth and death. And the human life is such a juncture that you can quit, you can begin the process of quitting this cycle of repeated birth and death. Therefore the human life is very, very special, very, very special. It's not to be squandered away, it is to be utilized for higher values, higher principles of life. And in this particular age, Kali Yuga, human life is even more important, even more valuable. Why? Because in previous lives, in previous yugas, the lifetimes was long, but the processes also took long time to fructify, for the result to come forth. In this Kali Yuga, although the lifespan is very short, 100 years or less, but the process is so potent, the Hari Kirtan, Hari Nam is so potent that even in this short lifespan, we can achieve full perfection. And for this reason, it is mentioned in the, is it Bhagvatam or maybe Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the demigods, like King Indra and other demigods, they actually desire to take birth in Kali Yuga on earth as human, because they can get this shortcut method. So those who are aware of this method, they will take it with full enthusiasm and just go full speed. And that's what we are trying to do, just spread this message and tell everybody, don't lose this opportunity, take it up and you'll see the benefit.
Can I add something to this if it's okay?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
There is a little verse from by the fifth guru pertaining to the same exact thing you're talking about, but it's just a little different version of it.
Sure.
And what it says is, Pai Parapat Manus Deuriya, Govind Milan ki ye teri pariya, Avar Kaj tere kite nakam, Mil saad sagat bhaj keval naam.
Great.
That this particular human body that has been given to you, it has been given to you after many, many cycles that we are talking about.
Yeah.
And this is the only opportunity you have
Yeah.
to break those cycles. And the only way to do that is to hook up with or to pertain more towards bhakti, and that in a satsanga, in people of your kind, you can say.
Yes, satsang.
Yes.
In satsang.
Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Bhava. Sadhu Sangha, Navamatra Sarva Siddhi. This is in Bengali. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita.
But very nice quote. Thank you for bringing that.
So we can, so many verses are coming to our mind from Bhagvatam. But yeah, from Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Bhava. All the verses are, all the Shastras are shouting from their, they are shouting from the treetops. Sadhu Sangha, Sadhu Sangha, Sadhu Sangha. Sarva Shastra Part. All the Shastras are talking about it. Sadhu Sangha, Lavamatra. Lavamatra means very small duration. Sadhu Sangha, Lavamatra, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. You will find all perfection, right? You can talk about other verses in Bhagavatam.
Maybe we should ask more questions.
More questions, yes, please. More comments.
Questions or
Whatever disagreements, you just let them out.
Thank you. Yeah. If any reflection, anything comes to your
Yeah, any
mind.
reflection, any comments?
So, Dave, were you able to understand or relate to what we're talking about a little bit? Maybe? Sort of? Okay, that's better than nothing. So, any other questions or comments? Anything you'd like to say? I don't mean to put you on spot. I'm just saying. If you would like to say, otherwise we can conclude, right? Sandeep, too?